What if I told you the person who really killed JFK was not the person who the government wants you to believe did it? You'd probably say, yeah, no shit. People have been saying that for 60 years. But then what if I told you that the person who killed JFK left behind evidence in the form of military documents, photos, and a written confession? I'm talking about the story of Roscoe White, a former Marine and Dallas police officer who may have entrusted his family with a secret so shocking that the FBI stole the bombshell piece of evidence supporting his secret. That secret? A journal containing a written entry by Roscoe White confessing to the murder of John F. Kennedy. 30 years ago, Ricky White, the son of Roscoe White, discovered the journal in his dad's old Naval footlocker. To this day, Ricky believes that his dad was one of the gunmen on the grassy knoll that took out the president. Some people believe that Ricky's entire story is bullshit, and that his father, Roscoe White, had nothing to do with the JFK assassination. They believe the White family made up the story for money, attention, or both. Others see truth to the story and believe that Roscoe White pulled the trigger, or at least participated in the tactical efforts to take out the president. Whatever you choose to believe, here are the facts. 1. Roscoe White served in the same military division as Lee Harvey Oswald, the 1st Marine Air Wing. 2. In 1959, Roscoe White re-enlisted for 6 years but inexplicably changed his mind in 1962 and applied for a hardship discharge. In the meantime, Oswald, who had also received a hardship discharge, had defected to Russia for 31 months and then was allowed to return to the United States without so much as a debriefing by U.S. intelligence. 3. In 1963, Roscoe moved his family to Dallas, settling in the quiet neighborhood of Oak Cliff. In October that same year, Lee Oswald moved to the same neighborhood. 4. In September of 1963, 2 months before the JFK shooting, Roscoe White joined the Dallas police force, and his wife, Geneva, worked for a few weeks as a hostess in Jack Ruby's Carousel Club. 5. Ricky White discovered that the journal with his dad's confession was stolen and blamed the FBI. The FBI would later deny ever seeing the diary, though a Dallas police report seems to confirm Ricky's version of events. And 6. The Warren Commission's findings that Lee Harvey Oswald acted as the lone gunman are considered largely unsubstantiated by many prominent ballistics and law enforcement experts who have analyzed the evidence. In a recent poll, only 28% of Americans believe Oswald acted alone. Here to go through the story of Roscoe White and the JFK assassination with me is Brian Edwards. Brian has over 2 decades of law enforcement experience as a tactical police officer and has been researching the JFK assassination for over 4 decades. Brian is also the co-author of the book Admitted Assassin: Roscoe White and the Murder of President Kennedy. Whatever you choose to believe, I hope this conversation can be a small part of the process to help you get there. Now, without further ado, please enjoy this deep-diving, wide-ranging conversation with Brian Edwards on the story of Roscoe White. Brian Edwards, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Zach, for having me on.
Of course. I'm excited to, and I've been going on a deep dive of just the Brian Edwards JFK rabbit hole on YouTube, and it's a fascinating endeavor. It's a highly detailed journey to go down that rabbit hole, and I wanted to start because I've heard you say multiple times on the different videos that I've watched that you've dedicated your entire life to researching the Kennedy assassination. And I'm curious what drew you down that rabbit hole in the first place. What was the thing that drew you into JFK?
Well, I was 7 years old when President Kennedy was assassinated, and I remember being in grade school and the second grade, and the principal came on the intercom and told the entire school that President Kennedy had been shot in Dallas. And of course, I'm 7 years old. I don't know anything about what a president is or what it means to the whole world. And I remember they let us go home early that day. And when I went home, my mom was ironing a shirt for my dad, and she was crying while she was watching television. And I thought that was That's the first time I'd seen my mother cry, and I didn't know why, and I didn't really understand. And I remember soon after President Kennedy was buried, we watched the funeral. We watched the funeral procession on television, and when they showed the day before, when they showed Oswald getting shot, I remember my dad saying to my mother, kind of over my head, said, "Well, now we'll never know the damn truth. Now the suspect is dead." And I think maybe in the back of my little 7-year-old head, a little light bulb went off. And it wasn't maybe a year or less than a year later, my parents bought a copy of The Torches Past. It was put out by the Kansas City Star. And
Mm.
it was basically a coffee table book, picture book. And so I sat and read that and looked at that every day, and I was just amazed of the. I guess my fascination at the time was the riderless horse, Blackjack. I still remember the horse's name. Couldn't remember what I did 2 hours ago, but I can remember Blackjack. And I
Right.
remember watching, just watching the funeral procession that the day of the funeral, and looked at all the military men and the people crying, and I thought maybe there's something more than just a man being shot and killed. So anyway, fast forward to my junior high school years, we had to do a book report as a final project, and I picked up Rush to Judgment. It was the first book I ever bought with my own money, and I bought it at the grocery store. And I read it. I read it front to cover, front to back, and wondered why this attorney, Mark Lane, was able to get more information out of people than what the Warren Commission eventually was able to get. And I thought, well, the both stories can't be correct. So there's got to be some middle ground here. And so that's what started me down that rabbit hole. And it's all Mark Lane's fault, basically. I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm not the only one that everybody read. But he was the first critical analysis of the Warren Commission. That's why I dedicated, every day when I was old enough to remember how to research things and how to go to the library and get books. And not there hasn't been a day that I can recall that I didn't read, write, or talk to somebody or watch a video or whatever about the assassination. It's the fascinating murder story that'll never be solved. I hope it will be, but not in my lifetime, maybe yours. But it's just a fascinating whodunit. And every day it seems like there's new pieces coming out, and somebody finds a piece of pepper in the mix, and now we go off on a different tangent. But
Yeah.
that's how I got involved in it. I've collected over the last I don't know 55, 60 years, over 500 books, and I've read 99% of them. And it's just a fascinating story about the death of a president that a lot of people don't seem to care
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, so you had different parts of the narrative of the JFK assassination seep in to your spongy brain from
Yeah,
7 years old, the spongy brain of a child,
yeah,
continuing through high school, obviously, all the way up till now. And it makes me think because the only thing I have to compare that to, which is going through a historical event in grade school, is 9/11 happened
yeah,
when I was in 2nd grade, and I had a similar reaction where no one was really sure what was going on. No one's telling us the full capacity, obviously, because we're 8 years old, 9 years old, and we didn't see any videos until later, or at least I didn't. But then it was just a day off from school. We got sent
right,
home from school. We got quarantined in the gymnasium because I went to school in Long Island, New York, about 20 miles away from the World Trade Center. So they weren't sure if there were going to be other attacks. So we quarantined, went home from school, and obviously we found out greater details later, and how tremendously tragic of an event that was. And I did know people around my age who went through, they experienced 9/11 like I did, but then from that moment on, they became invested
Yeah.
in things like being a Navy SEAL, or they decided to go into the military. The 9/11 like flicked on a switch in their brains where they just wanted to do something about it. For whatever reason, I never it definitely affected me with, just the gravitas of being in New York, and the World Trade Centers where they used to be are not there anymore. That's
Yeah.
pretty crazy to have seen, but I never really dedicated it never really like shift my worldview. So I'm wondering for you, because the JFK assassination has seemed to shift your worldview, and it totally changed the trajectory of your career and your passions. What do you think it was that was different about either your experience or your brain, just like the way you were taking in information, that caused you to make that shift?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think to me, of course, when I was growing up, I didn't know I was going to go into law enforcement, but it's a even as a kid, I recognized that it was a significant killing of an individual that in broad daylight in front of hundreds of witnesses that made me want to dig deep and to find out what are all the stories involved in this event. I mean, it's sad that a tragic event will click a little brain cell in people's heads to make them want to look into it more deeply. But for me, I think just the idea of who put, why would anybody want to kill the president? I mean, I sure you're not going to make everybody happy, and I get that, but what prompted someone or some group to manifest such a plot to put down a president to keep him from seeking, doing good things for the government or doing for all of us? And why is that important now? Uh, why is it still important 61, almost 61 years after the fact? I think it's because somebody didn't like what Kennedy was trying to do. Um,
Yeah.
and they took the deadly steps to make sure that he wasn't going to accomplish those things. And I think the other part of your question, I think it to me it makes me more cynical because
Mm,
I I don't believe everything I read. I mean, you can't because you don't know the real story. That's why I dig into it myself to find out the information myself. Somebody was asking me a couple days ago about, so and so, President Biden's going to supposed to release all these documents. I don't have a lot of faith in documents because how do you know how long they've been in there?
yeah.
And they could have been put in there 15 minutes before they start dumping them. So and there's not going to be anything written on a piece of paper. I mean, we all know that they're not that
Hmm.
stupid. But just to dig into just the minutia is to me is time wasting. I like to look. My area of concern is the photographs, the statements that witnesses provided immediately after the assassination, and um, the physical evidence. I think those are the three areas that I really like to concentrate on. But all in all, I think the for me the bottom line is we should have known the truth in 64 or after the investigation, but we still don't, and that's what motivates me to
Mm,
keep looking. I'm going to keep
yeah.
digging until I can't read a paper anymore or read a document or read a statement or whatever it might be. I want to know what happened. And if the government told us in 64 that one guy did it, then show us everything you got and we'll digest that. And if not, why are you still continuing to hide documents and information? It's national security 61 years after the fact. I have a hard time believing that they're protecting a specific entity or an asset after 61 years. So
Yeah.
that basically is why I dug into this and is still digging today.
Yeah. You mentioned the book report that you wrote. Was that back in ninth
Yeah.
grade?
Yeah,
Did you really write 50 pages
I did.
comparing the
Yeah,
Warren report
front
to
and back.
the
Yeah,
Mark Lane book?
I did. Yeah.
That I
I wish I had that, document. I wish I had that book report now just to see what I thought back then after reading just 2 books. I compared Rush to Judgment and the Warren Report,
wow.
and, I turned it in, and the teacher said, "Well, there's no way I'm gonna read this." And so, she kept it, and that's the last I saw of it was when I was in ninth grade, so
Yeah,
but, yeah,
my
I did write 50 pages.
yeah, my memories of writing book reports are squeezing out 1 page of
Yeah,
actual
yeah,
content into 9 to 10 pages of BS. So the fact that you were that passionate about it from such a young age just goes to show what the future would hold.
yeah.
I think the question on everyone's mind is, did that 50-page book report help you with the ladies at all in high school?
No, no, no,
Okay.
I wasn't,
Attention to detail.
yeah,
Women
that's
usually like that.
yeah, I like that. In fact, I carried that on in my law enforcement career. But as far as high school, it's funny in high school, uh, I wasn't the best student. In fact, I graduated pretty low in my class. I had to take summer school to make up for classes that I just blew off. And that to me that was it's the dynamic because I could focus my energy and expertise on 50 pages, but I can't get through an English class.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that I had to do that. But and then when I went into junior college, I puddled around with that, trying to figure out where I want to go with my life. And somebody suggested I take a law enforcement class, and it was the first time in my whole academic career or journey that I got A's. So that light bulb must have went off again and said, "Hey, maybe this is what you're supposed to do because you're passionate about it." And that led me into law enforcement. And 22 years later, I I enjoyed my career, but I was pretty meticulous on things, and a lot of guys didn't think that it was a cool way to do law enforcement. But if you got to write it down, and it's got to make sense, and if you don't,
Yeah.
a bad guy could go free. So that was my philosophy. I want to make
Yeah.
it specifically and concise and tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like part of the reason that there's a lot of problems with law enforcement today is because of the lack of meticulous people. I would think if anything, cops would think being meticulous is cool because why else would you sign up to be a cop if you're just going to be like, yeah, if he fired 4 rounds or 7 rounds, just write a number down on the
Yeah.
paperwork. Doesn't really matter.
Well,
Um,
it's funny you say that because when I was teaching at Washburn University in Topeka, the criminal justice department for several years, I had one of the assignments was you had to ride. Every student had to ride with a law enforcement agency, uh, 4 hours on one shift and 4 hours on another shift, and then you were to report. Write your feelings and your observations and your thoughts about what you experienced. And one kid came back to me and he says, I got to drop your class. It's not about you, but it's just I didn't realize there was so much writing involved in law enforcement. Uh,
mm, yeah,
it's not Miami Vice. It's, you got to write things down. So I carried that into the research of the Kennedy assassination. I write every day about something.
yeah. Yeah, and I wanted to get into your background in law enforcement because you were a tactical officer,
Right.
correct?
Yes.
What is the job of a tactical officer look like? What does that entail? And like how are you going about your day from an operations standpoint?
Well, I was tried out, and it was won a spot on the tactical team. It was called the Crisis Response Team, CRT, Crisis Response Team here in Lawrence. And we had specific training every month. We'd have training like hostage situation or barricaded individual or active shooter, warrant drug arrests or warrant arrests, all high risk things. And so we received training once a month as a team, as a group team. I mean, every week we would train individually. We had 3 teams of 7, and with a supervisor. And every week our team would train, but then every month we would all train together. And I did that for about 7 years. I was entry on the entry team. I was a team B. It was the name of our team. Pretty classy name.
Yeah.
Team B. I was on the entry team. I was the first guy in the door. I had a body bunker that I would ballistic shield that I would carry, and the guys would be behind me. So I was the first guy in the door every time. And
Mm.
we do high risk warrants, and we do surveillance on people, and we learn how to where they lived and what problems we might encounter, or their children or their dogs or their fences or their barricaded doors, that sort of thing. We learn all that before we go hit the house or the apartment building or whatever it might be. And then after the 7 years, there was an opening on the counter sniper team, and so I applied for that and qualified, and was on the counter sniper team for almost 3.5 years. While I did that, I was sent to 2 schools, one in Kansas City, Missouri Police Department sniper school, and then I was sent to Eden, uh, Enid, Oklahoma, on another sniper school. And so those 2 schools plus 3 or 4 years doing the job, that was my experience with the assault team.
Mm.
But we were police officers. I mean, we were uniform. I was a uniformed police officer, but I had all my gear in the car in case a call up would occur while I was on my shift, and so we would respond and take care of whatever we had to take care of. But uh, tactical tactical officers are more specialized trained than basic road officer. I mean, we've gone through countless self defense and shooting scenarios, and uh, repelling, and whatever you can think of, whatever you've seen on TV. That's the kind of stuff that we did.
So you're basically trying to figure out any possibility that the enemy can do, and you're testing those out. Like if they're gonna have a bomb by the door, there's 3
Right.
shooters on the inside, all different angles, all
Yeah.
different situations. You're running those tests
Yeah.
constantly as a tactical officer.
We would practice. We would have when we have a group, when we have a monthly group team, one of the teams would be the bad guys. And so you've got people that are trained in counter assault being the bad guy, which is not, it's pretty uncommon, but if we practiced, if we could take them down, we'd take turns being the bad guy. But we would assault somebody's house. We'd go to one of our officers' houses and plan, where to breach the door if we were going to breach the door, where we're going to
Mm.
put up teams, where we're going to put the counter snipers, where we're going to set up a command post, where the communication system is going to start. All those things, all those factors we would have before we made, the assault. Because in like the Kennedy assassination, I know hopefully you're going to get to that,
Yeah.
but the Kennedy assassination, they had that planned out. I mean, they knew all the contingencies. What would happen if, plan A goes up, down the creek? What are we going to do? Plan B will be in place. These are the people will be doing that. So all those factors were already figured into the plan.
Yeah, it seems like there would be few things sweeter than fake shooting a colleague during a tactical training
Yeah,
exercise, just to have those bragging rights.
yeah,
Um, so,
yeah.
so,
We
so,
yeah, paintballs hurt up close range. Yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah,
just unloading that clip right into a
yeah.
friend's face. I saw you give a beast of a 3-hour presentation on the tactical side of the JFK assassination, which obviously you're more than qualified to give with your background in law enforcement and tactical background. And one line you used to describe the assassination with which stuck with me is you said the JFK assassination was a quote highly organized multi-shooter ambush of the president in broad daylight with extreme prejudice. Obviously, it's going to be impossible to cover all of the details from that presentation. It was 3 hours. I'm going to link it in the show notes where people can check that out. But could you give a little bit of an overview of how you think that multi-shooter ambush went down, from the number of teams in place to maybe possible positions they took, how they evaded capture, like whatever comes to mind?
Okay. Um, First of all, you got to, and I'm going to parallel this with how we operated. We knew the stage basically. We knew what, for example, we're going to do a drug raid on a house. We knew what the house looked like. We knew where the bathrooms were because that's where they would dump the drugs. We knew where the windows were. We knew where the doors, how they open. We knew the property before we hit it. In the Kennedy assassination, they decided, whoever they, and when I say they, whoever decided to put this together knew the best places to do an ambush, and they knew the route, and they knew where the cars were going to make the biggest turns. They knew where the least amount of people might be for collateral damage. So they knew that Dealey Plaza, or they determined that Dealey Plaza was the perfect place because they could have people on the same level as the car, or close to the same level as the target. They could have points of access. They could have points of egress. They could have points of escape. They could have uh, their communication system would not be hindered by tall buildings or radio interference or what it might be there. They had access to parking lots. They had access to buildings. They
Mm,
basically decided, here's the best place. Now we got to put our people in place. We have encrypted radio communications. I mean, these guys, the shooters had to have somebody on the radio with them. It was either them, the actual shooters had a radio system, or the spotters who were with them had radios, because there had to be a coordinated effort to ensure that the lone assassin, three shot scenario nonsense would had to be believable by people that were there. And
mm,
so they placed people in front of, to the right side and to the left side in front of the Kennedy car, because, if he stops, if he backs up, if he turns right, we've got people in place to take those contingency plans and adapt as they go on the fly. I mean, it was a fluid operation. Things were changing all the time, but if they controlled how people got access. I mean, you had police officers who were stationed at Elm and Houston for the crowd control, but there was nobody in the buildings. There was nobody in the
mm,
parking lot. There were two officers on the triple underpass. People were standing with the officers on the triple underpass who the officers didn't know who these people were. Are they railroad workers, or are they part of the team?
mm,
So if you confuse the situation by putting people in places who normally aren't there. For example, you put a cop behind the fence and you keep people back away, and you have somebody who pretends to be a CIA agent or a Secret Service agent and tells people to leave. Then that they did that. So they had everything covered, and they had to know that this situation is critical, that he has to be dead before he gets to the triple underpass. This is our prime prime shooting field. We have to make sure he's dead before he gets under that bridge, because after that he's going to, no, nobody knows how the Secret Service is going to react. Maybe they'll stop and cover him, or they'll speed out of the area. But they knew all those things. They anticipated all those things before they pulled the trigger.
yeah. So this, from your perspective, and with all of your tactical knowledge, this looked like a complex, pre-planned ambush. Like you said, there's multiple teams running.
Yes.
Not all teams know they don't have the same objective. They have different objectives running in Dealey Plaza. Some are
Yeah.
shooters, some are spotters, and they're probably they've done multiple repetitions of
Yes.
these exercises, if not dozens. I don't know
Yes.
how many repetitions you would run for a tactical operation like this, but I would think it would have to be dozens of times just so, like, you have it down over a course of
Yeah.
months.
Yeah. And to me, Zach, the critical part was the speed of the car, because that's where your target's at. And I'm not disparaging President Kennedy's memory, but I'm just saying he's a target when these people are, as far as these people are concerned, he's a target.
Yeah.
They had to know that that car is going to go slow enough that they could have a time to put their bullets in in his body. So somehow, some way, somebody made the decision to slow that car down to about 7 to 10 miles an hour. And from the time they made the turn onto Elm Street from Houston until they got to the triple underpass, according to this testimony of Kellerman and Greer, the Greer was the driver, Kellerman was the passenger Secret Service agent. That car was driving between 10 and 11 miles an hour. Well, I've done the calculations, and from the time if they turn the corner at 11 miles an hour and turn onto Elm Street and get to the triple underpass, that car, the target is in view for almost 30 seconds. That
Mm.
is a lifetime
Yeah.
for a target to be exposed. So the critical part to me was one, changing the motorcade, changing the configuration of the motorcade, putting Kennedy's car as the second car, putting him in a spot where he couldn't stop, and then slowing that car down. Those three key factors, I think, will help to enable the assassination to take place. But yeah, these people knew all that before they got there. They knew their distances, they knew the wind direction, they knew the time he was going to show up, they knew where he was going to be sitting in the car, they knew what he was wearing, they knew everything about that situation so that they could be successful.
How difficult is that shot? Because you're going from high to low grounds. You have a moving body in a moving car. It is going the car's going slower, but it's still a moving object. How difficult would that shot be
It
for?
would have been it would have been extremely
Yeah,
difficult, but
yeah.
if you can freeze the target, which a lot of people believe that the shot that hit President Kennedy in the back kind of froze him in position. He couldn't move because he had that back brace on. If you can freeze the target, it's relatively. I mean, it's moderate to difficult, but these people, whoever these people are, have taken these kind of shots before. That's why they used them.
Mm,
But for me, um, I would have I would have considered the high to low shot the most difficult. If there was an assassin in the sixth floor, that's a very difficult shot to do. 9 times out of 10, you're going to hit low. You're going to aim high, and you'll miss the target completely. That's
mm,
why I believe the kill shots were at a lower level, like the street level behind the picket fence, and perhaps the railroad bridge or the triple underpass. I believe there was a shooter up there because
yeah.
you put somebody in front, you put somebody in the side and behind, he can't go anywhere. Um, yeah, high to low is difficult. Uh, Almost same level trajectory is relatively easy.
Mm,
Um, so if you put people as close as possible to the target, most of the shootings that we did practicing were within 100 yards because you didn't have to worry about wind and directions and all the 10 factors involved in shooting. So yeah, they placed the people close to the target.
from a tactical perspective, what are some of the most intriguing parts of the JFK assassination that you think get overlooked? Things that you can see with your trained eye, but other people may not notice about the situation.
Well, one of the things that I always looked at was the radio communication people. Um,
Mm,
there's two pictures, and I'll send those to you so you can show your viewers.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
two pictures that were taken that show civilian people that were wearing civilian clothes. I don't know what their connections were to any entity or group, but they're on radio communicate. They're on a radio walkie-talkie, so they have to be talking to somebody.
Mm,
And they're not police. The police didn't have that capability in '63. Portable radios. I mean, your car radio was stuck in the car. If you got out of the car, you couldn't communicate. And that's and segue into Tippett. Officer Tippett went into the top 10 record store to make a phone call because he couldn't talk over the radio communication, the channel 1 or 2 of the Dallas PD. So he had to go into a private business or a business to make a phone call. Well, Dallas police and the sheriff's department didn't have walkie talkies or radio communications that were linked to their system back in 63. So these two pictures that we have show two men, two different people using walkie talkies. So who are they talking to? We don't know. There's someplace somebody is in Overwatch, the guy who's coordinating this shooting, and that's another area that I think is overlooked a lot. Is if radio communications were used, which I believe they had to have been, there had to be somebody who was on the spot in a position to see the entire Dealey Plaza, who used the radio as a controlling the shooting sequence to tell them when to start, when to stop, uh, if somebody's getting too close to, if somebody's going to breach your security plane, you have to have communication system. So I think a lot of people forget about, you know, who's coordinating. Well, it's the shot caller who's on the scene. We had one of those. We had a command post set up, and we would have direct communications with our supervisor, who would tell us take the shot or not take the shot. I mean, we waited until they told us what to do. A lot of people forget about these guys just weren't shooting just to be shooting. It was a coordinated effort because and it was a sequential so that we can all the witnesses could say, "Oh yeah, it sounded like three shots from behind me or three shots from another place." So that was one of the areas that I thought that needed to be addressed, and that's
Yeah.
why I focused on that in my presentation.
Yeah, I think I remember those photos. It was a lighter guy and a darker guy sitting on the curb
Yeah,
with the
right,
radios, and everyone else
right,
is sprinting away,
right.
and they're just kind of chilling there, like they look like they're having a picnic,
Yeah.
just bopping around
Well,
when the
and
president just got shot.
it's interesting that I wasn't the most uh, intelligent police officer ever worked on our department, but if I had been at the scene and I see somebody sitting down and everybody's running, I'm not chasing the witness. I'll go to the guy who's sitting down and tell me
Mm,
what happened. What did you see? What can you tell me? uh, People are running all over the place except these two guys. One of them is the umbrella guy that's holding the umbrella, and the other guy is the dark skinned guy. He's the one with the radio communication system. And then up on the bridge, there was another picture taken of a bridge, a guy on the top of the triple underpass. He's talking on the radio too, but nobody's even concerned about them. And that was what
mm,
I thought was so fascinating is you don't know the cops didn't know who the good guys and the bad guys were, and they counted on chaos to help them not only escape but to muddy the waters, as it will. It just you don't know who to talk to because everybody's going to see something. You and I could see the same event and we'd have two different impressions of it. So you continue with the chaos and people running and screaming and the motorcycles and the sirens. You don't know where to go.
yeah,
They
I,
did
I
that on purpose.
I've heard about cops identifying perpetrators in other events like mass shootings or bombings, like if the suspect is they're not really sure who it was and they're looking at security footage of the area,
Yeah,
that cops also they'll often see footage of people that are just oddly calm in
yeah.
the situation, and that a few times that's ended up being the guy who's done it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
those would have been the first somebody asked me a while back, he said, "If you could go back in time, where would you go?" Well, obviously, I'm gonna go back to Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963 at 12:30 Central Standard Time, but I wanna see what the guys, I wanna see what happened behind the fence, and I wanna see what those 2 guys were doing after the event. Well, who are the 2 guys sitting on the curb? They're the most calm. Shots were just fired basically right over their head, and yet they're sitting down, watching the traffic go by.
yeah.
Those are suspicious traits to me. Those are the guys I want to talk to.
Yeah. I wanna get into Admitted Assassin, and I'm just gonna grab the book because I have it
Okay,
over here because I want
I've
people to
got it.
see what it looks like.
I've got it
Oh,
right
you
here.
got it? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let me get because I'm gonna reference some things from it as
Okay.
well, so I'm just gonna be right
All
back.
right.
We'll do a double book. Alright. Here we go. Admitted assassin Roscoe White and the murder of President Kennedy, which I had the pleasure of going through this past weekend. And it's a fascinating book, and it tells a fascinating story uh, about Roscoe White, and it does it through the the words of Ricky White and what he's spoken to you, Roscoe White's son, Ricky, having spoken to you and Gary Shaw. And Roscoe White leaves a trail behind for his son, Ricky. Who was Roscoe White, and how did you come upon Roscoe White's story?
Well, Roscoe White was a Dallas police officer. He started in October of 1963 and retired or quit the job almost to the day in 1965. How and Gary Shaw would be the one who initiated this in 1982. Ricky White's grandfather, his mother's father, passed away in Paris, Texas, and the family gathered at their home. And outside the house, I mean, there's a detached shed that was on their property at the time. And Ricky said two of his cousins went out to the shed to look for antiques or a piano or something, and found Roscoe's footlocker, Ricky's father's footlocker from the United States Marine Corps. Well, Ricky immediately laid claim to it and opened it up and found all kinds of military memorabilia and letters from home and assortment of things. The trunk was not completely full. I mean, it had a lot of things in it, but one of the things at the bottom of the footlocker was a diary, a black bound, leather bound, small diary that had a little clasp on it, and Ricky threw that and all the other items from the trunk into his car because he couldn't get the trunk home in the sports car, and so he left the trunk but took all the contents and
Hmm.
went home and looked through it, and then that was in '82. And in '86, about '86, he had time to actually sit down and read some of the diary. Well, and he got bored with it because it was chronicled his father's life from the time he was in college or high school until he got like 4 days before he died. And so it didn't mean anything to Ricky because he was talking about military, a lot of acronyms and things that he didn't understand. So he put it away. And then, but one of the things he did read in the diary was about his father had left a bank bag with some keys in it, and Ricky remembers in the footlocker there was a bank bag from Wynwood State Bank with two keys in it, and so he and his mother decided to go to the bank and see. And this was after Ricky's father had passed away. Went to the bank to see if they could get into the vault.
Hmm.
They were able to. Ricky tells us that inside that bank safety deposit box number 203 it was two excuse me was $200,000 in bearer bonds. And bearer bonds have no serial numbers. There's no record of how they were purchased, who purchased them. Basically, a bearer bond is like cash. Whoever possesses it is take it to the bank and they'll cash it for you.
Yeah.
The bank wouldn't let them take the money because, according to the bank manager or the person who let them into the vault, said that we need to prove that your father's will was probated. Well, Ricky didn't know the will had been probated. His mother had never told him that. So they left, and they were going to work on that later. Ricky contacted the following December. Ricky contacted the assistant DA of Midland, Texas, by the man named Al Shorey, and said, "Hey, I need your help to probate my father's will." And so the guy tells him, "Well, tell me all about the story." And so he tells him the story, doesn't mention anything about the money or what bank it was. It just said, "I've got money my father left from my mother, and my brother and I."
Hmm.
He says, Ricky said, the guy said, "Oh, sure, I'll help you." Al Shorey
Yeah.
contacts the FBI and tells them a story about how Ricky White's father was a cop and he had all these documents and had these millions of dollars in money in the bank vault and all that. Well, the FBI set up surveillance on Ricky in 1987 in December. And unbeknownst to Ricky and his wife, the FBI was following them for 2 days. And then
Mm.
finally, in January, January, I think it was the 8th, January 13th, 1988, the FBI shows up at Ricky's home and says, "We need you to bring all your father's material, assassination related material, down to their FBI headquarters. We need to talk to you." So 5 hours later, Ricky's, he's still in the custody of the FBI, not free to go. And according to Ricky, the agents copied everything in that he brought with him in a big cardboard box. Everything that he brought, they made copies of, including the diary.
Mm.
Ricky said that he and his wife had eventually read the diary, that there was an entry for November 22nd, 1963, where his father wrote in graphic detail about his direct involvement in the assassination.
Did they read do you know about when they discovered that diary entry
That
from
was about, I think Ricky remembers reading that, about 1987, 88, right
Okay.
before the FBI goes
So
into the picture.
so he first started going through the diary, he sees, journal entries with, a lot of military jargon,
Right.
some stories, so it's not like anything groundbreaking, so it
No.
takes him a while to get to the JFK entry.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
got it.
And so he read that many times, he said, and he couldn't believe that what he was reading. And so he showed it to his wife, and she read it, and they both looked at each other like, this isn't real. Is it real? Did your father really was he really involved in the assassination of Kennedy? So Ricky had the diary, took all that material down to the Midland field office of the FBI. They copied everything, and then told Ricky he could go. Ricky goes home, and it was within an hour or 2 hours, according to what he remembers. There was a knock at the door, and his wife had let the agent in, and who said to her, uh, "Ricky was with us today. He probably picked up my notebook, and can I get it?" And she obviously had no idea that Ricky had been with the FBI all day. Said, "Yeah, well, the material's on the pool table. Go find it." Well, as she is coming out of the bedroom after talking to Ricky, saying that the FBI is here, the agent walked past her with his hand in his coat pocket and said, "I got what I needed, thanks." Well, a couple days
Mm,
later, Ricky was putting it all back together in the box and noticed that the diary was gone. So the only logical explanation was that Agent Ferris, Tom Ferris, thank you very much. If I ever have a chance to meet you, I'm going to have little words with you. Uh,
mm,
he believes that Tom Ferris of the FBI took that diary. And so we don't have the diary. We have no idea. But what the diary said, Ricky and Trisha, Gary and I were, when we were putting the book together, interviewed Ricky and Trisha separately in their home. Tell me what you remember about the November 22nd, 63 diary entry. And both of them, Jack, both of them almost mirrored each other from separate rooms about what they
mm.
remember seeing and reading in that diary. It's about a page and a half in Roscoe's handwriting that he was involved in the assassination of President Kennedy.
Is that a police officer tactic for questioning? Because I've just seen that in TV
Yeah,
shows where you separate,
yeah,
suspects, and then you ask one, what's your story, and then you ask the other one, what's your story, in separate
exactly.
rooms, so you
Yeah,
can sort of put the pieces together. And
yeah.
they said essentially the same thing.
Basically, almost exactly verbatim the same thing. Ricky said that he'd read it so many times it was burned into his brain.
Mm,
And when I talked to Ricky a couple of weeks ago, I asked him specifically because I knew I was coming on your show, or a week ago. I asked him, I said, "We're going to get into the diary." I said, "Do you remember what the diary says?" "Oh, yeah." He recited it almost verbatim what's in the book. And
yeah.
so anyway, the timeline goes on, and so Ricky had all these pictures. His father had kept a binder of photographs that he had collected or somehow obtained from the Dallas Police Department. Original photographs of Oswald's mugshot, Ruby's mugshot, the evidence they collected, the search warrant they executed at the Payne Hound, all the property they brought back to the police station. Somebody took those pictures. Roscoe had those pictures from the original negatives in a binder in a closet at their home. And
Mm,
Ricky remembers whenever his mother and father were gone, he'd have friends over and he'd show them these pictures. I mean, they were there. One of them was an autopsy photograph of Oswald. I mean, how did Roscoe get these photographs? So
Were any of these photographs released? I think some of them were released, but some of them weren't.
some of those photographs, there was two pictures of the backyard photographs of Oswald. One was
Mhm.
the one that appears on the cover of Life magazine in the 1964 February edition, but there was one from the original negative that had not been seen by anybody. The House Senate Committee, the Warren Commission, nobody had ever seen this photograph. This is the third backyard photograph. And that's what stimulated somebody to tell the House Select Committee on Assassinations that there's more to this Roscoe White story.
Mhm.
So they had sent two investigators down and interviewed Ricky and his mother over a 2-day period, and on the diary and the there's the material in the foot locker and that sort of thing. So we fast forward to 1990. Ricky has all this material. He has
Mhm.
knowledge of the diary. He has found in the subsequent year, in 19 I think it was 89, he found no, it was a 90. He had found this material, and so he went to the JFK Assassination Information Center and contacted Larry Ray Harris, who was one of the key investors or
Mhm.
investigators for the center, and said, "Hey, I've got this material. Can you help me decide what to do with it, or is it important?" They contacted later the next day or two. They contacted J. Gary Shaw, and Ricky told his story to J. Gary Shaw,
Mm.
and so um, the um, the
Yeah.
story is that after the press, they held a press conference and Ricky's story was announced to the world. And then in 1990, Ricky returned to his grandparents' home in Paris, Texas, and found the metal canister with the cables and the green scrapbook.
Yeah.
So Ricky didn't J. Gary Shaw and the Assassination Information Center did not seek out Ricky White. Ricky went to them and said, "Here's material I have. What should I do with it?"
Did
That's how this story got started.
y Yeah, I wanted to go back to the photos for a second. Did did you have anyone examine the photos just to make sure they were legit negatives and not doctored in any way?
I think Gary Shaw did that.
Mhm.
I think he had photo experts look and could tell the print. I mean, they didn't have the negatives; they had the print, the
The
actual
print,
prints
yeah.
from the negatives. So they all they could do was say, "Yeah, that looks like an original negative print. It's sharp and crisp and all that." Uh, there are folks that believe that Roscoe was involved and when he was on the police department was assigned to the homicide unit as a photographer. I, I don't we don't
Mm,
know what he was doing on the police department.
yeah.
We have no his own wife didn't even know what he was doing. So those pictures, how he got to those or how he had access to those, I don't know. Maybe he was a souvenir collector. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna to ask you about the past a little bit of Roscoe White. So what we do know is you said he started as a Marine. Roscoe White was a Marine.
Right.
Ended up in the Dallas Police Department. I think it was 2 months or something like that before JFK was shot.
Right.
What do we
Yeah,
know?
actually he was hired October 15th, 1963.
Okay, so that's about a month, a little
Yeah.
over a month. What
Yeah.
do we know about the specifics of his career arc? Is there anything that's like not shady, like like you could point to specifically that he did this overseas because I know he was stationed overseas, or is a lot of it just sort of a blur?
Uh, normally you uh, you would find the person's application for the police department for the city of Dallas.
Hmm.
That doesn't exist apparently in the archives of Dallas Police Department. They don't have that original application, but yet there's applications of other people. His application is originally would have he applied for the job a month or 2 months before he got out of the Marine Corps, so he knew what he wanted to do.
Hmm.
Maybe he didn't know what he wanted to. Maybe somebody was telling him, "Hey, we need you on the police department." He had no background in law enforcement or military police while he was in the Marine Corps. So he gets out of the Marine Corps and he works odd jobs until the police department decides to do a background check on him, and they do all this investigation. Nowhere in his files that I can get access to, or any kind of recommendations, reviews, citations, disciplinary actions. The only thing we can find is a pay grade, his pay grade from, he was given a raise, incrementally through the year and a half, 2 years he was on the department, an ID card, one or two pictures of him, as a police officer, but no application,
Yeah.
no reviews, no nothing. Nothing is in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. One of the lines that is sort of a thesis to the book that kind of ties everything together is you write that Ricky's father purposely left behind material that points to a strong relationship between himself and certain forces behind the murder of President Kennedy.
Yes.
I'm curious, how does Ricky feel, or how does he sound when he talks about his father? Because I couldn't imagine having a father that's tied up in a story like that when it comes to the
Yeah.
assassination of a world leader. How does he? What sort of vibes do you get? Emotions, highs, low. Like what type of person does he seem like when he's talking about his father?
He's very emotional when he talks about his father. You gotta remember, Zach, when he turned 3 years old, that's the day that Ruby shot Oswald. That was his third birthday. And
Mm,
so he only knew his father for 8 more years because his father was killed tragically when Ricky was 11 years old. So he didn't really know him, but he remembers good times with him. He remembers his father would take him. Ricky was the youngest son of two. Tony was the older son, but Tony had some health issues, and it seemed to Ricky, according to what he told us, that Ricky seemed to think that his father was doting on him more because he was healthy and was able to enjoy things like he
mm,
was, like fishing and going on trips and doing those kind of things. And so Ricky is very emotional when he talks about his father. And can you imagine reading that diary for the first time of a father you really didn't know, that you thought you knew because he was married to my mom, and he and I, my brother, we had a great family life. And then reading what his father had written down is, your whole world's upside down now.
yeah.
You don't know the person you thought was your father was not really your father. He was living two lives.
Hmm.
And so, yes, he's quite,
Yeah.
even today, Ricky's very emotional when he talks about his father.
Yeah.
He'll tear up, when we were at the JFK conference last year. It was the first time he'd spoken to anybody since 1990 in a group, and he was getting emotional, and I was getting emotional just being around him because it's in his heart that he thought he knew his father, and come to find out he didn't.
Mm. The Yeah, yeah, I can't imagine what that would be like to have the weight of those revelations on your daily thoughts
Yeah.
and just that added emotional weight. I wanted to go back to the FBI taking the diary. So it was a you said it was an FBI agent, a certain FBI agent that went back to revisit Ricky and Trisha's house, and this is after the FBI made copies of everything at their
Yes.
own bureau or some offsite
It was yeah, it
headquarters.
was the same day. It was the same
Okay,
day.
that same
Yeah,
day, another agent comes back and says, "I forgot something," and then
right.
after that, the diary is nowhere to be found. Does Ricky also believe that the FBI is the one who stole it, or are there any other theories that have popped up, or is he pretty set on the FBI taking the diary?
That material, Zach, that material was in his possession from the time he had it in. He recovered it from the Foot Locker in 1982 until 1990. It never left his possession. He never let anybody read the diary. There are already 5 people that we can document that Ricky remembers have actually read the diary. That was Geneva White, Ricky, Trisha, his wife, their babysitter, and the babysitter's husband. And
Mm,
we've talked to all, well, obviously, we couldn't talk to Geneva, but all of those people verified that the diary existed. Um, and then Ricky had no reason to they didn't take whoever when Ferris showed up at the house. He didn't take any of the pictures. He didn't take the any of the other thing. He took the diary because it had evidence in there of a conspiratorial nature. Because now
mm,
it's not the Oswald story; it's the Roscoe White story. If Roscoe's admitting that he did this, we got to get that. We got to hide that and keep that from the American public. And when confronted by that at some conference, I don't know where it was, but I just read about it, not just recently, but it just happened that somebody had asked Ferris, did you take the diary? I never saw the diary. I never saw it, and he didn't bring it with him. Well, that's a lie. Ricky brought it to him, they made copies, and then he came back the same day and took it
mm,
because his mother, in fact, he called his mother just to verify that she didn't come into the house and unbeknownst to him take the diary. And he said, well, where's the diary? And she goes, I don't have it. And he
mm.
said, well, there's only one person that could have taken it, and that would have been the FBI agent.
So the diary's gone, but
Yeah.
Trisha, Ricky, who's Ricky's wife, and then Ricky say that they remember the entry almost verbatim because it's burned into their brains. They've read it so many times. Uh, and I wanted to read the entry if that's okay, how they remember it, because I think it's it's jarring to hear how it's put together, the exact words. I think it lends itself a lot to just like the emotional weight of what Ricky may be feeling having read these words. And these words were dictated to you and Gary Shaw,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
By Ricky and Trisha.
Yes.
So this is the dictation that you have written in the book. It says 11-22 63, Lebanon in parentheses, sixth floor, Saul in parentheses, records building, Mandarin in parentheses, stockade fence, shots fired from upper buildings for diversion, shots fired, looks as if target was hit, shots from fence, definite hit, man on other side of fence in the way, shots again from upper buildings, no hit, target opened, fired, definite hit, gun retrieved by man to the side, took to rail car area, whirled over fence, took man down to protect myself, ran around back of fence, down embankment to car, drove to Oak Cliff, met officer, told officer not to drive to house. Something at this point was wrong. And then I have the rest of it here. Forced to take out officer at 10th and Patton, not going as planned. Backtracked to car, drove back to the area to take out other passenger. Failed to transport subject to Redbird in parentheses airport. Realized what a mistake I had made. Hope it's all over. Back to DBD. Back to DPD awaiting information. What is going through your mind when you hear that for the first time said by Ricky and Trisha?
It scared me that somebody would write that down and leave it for somebody to find. Um, I can't. I'm just thinking about it. If that was my father and he'd written that, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know how to react. I mean,
Yeah.
it's devastating that he wrote those. And what's interesting, Zach, is that those things, those key points in there, are things that actually happened. So he didn't, unless he was there. How did he know about those things? How did he know that there was a man in front of him, a man standing in front of the fence that was in the way? And I think he's referring to Gordon Arnold there. Um, had that,
Mhm.
um, had, let's see, what was the other part was went to Oak Cliff
Yeah.
and met officer. Now remember, unless he had a radio communication system in Roscoe's car, he drove his own car that day to work. Whether he drove that to Oak Cliff or not, but he found officer, he found Tippett, And then you remember he says, told officer not to drive by the apartment. Well, is he referring to 1026 North Beckley? I think he is. And then you remember what Arlene Roberts said, the witness in the inside the rooming house. She said, "I heard a horn honk, and I looked up and I saw a police car with two officers in it."
Hmm.
So it's okay. Now is Tippett and Off and White together? Probably. Are they looking for Oswald? Probably. And then he says, took out the officer at 10th and Patton. Unless there was another officer involved at 10th and Patton, that's got to be Tippett. He's talking about Tippett. Now, did Roscoe take him out? Probably, because speculation, of course, is 99% questionable. But did Roscoe and Tippett get into a fight and go, hey, I can't go along with this. I got to get out of here. I don't want to take any chances and losing my job. And so rather than take a chance of what he's going to spill, you kill him.
Hmm.
And so then now Roscoe is looking for Oswald when he writes, went back to area looking to take out passenger. Was Oswald a passenger in the car when this occurred? Maybe, maybe not. But then he writes, went back to DPD to wait instructions. Well, we have a story in there, the Tom Robinson story, where Tom Robinson's buddy, he was just a young kid, but his buddy was a captain on the police department, and they went to the police department to see what was going on. And Tom Robinson told his buddy, he says, "Hey man, I got to use the bathroom." And he says, "Well, by then there were so many people and so many media people in the police station, they couldn't get through the hallway. So the buddy's dad took him to the locker room that used by the PD." And so he was in there in the stall doing his thing, and he heard three officers come in and were whispering in hushed tones, "You weren't supposed to kill Oswald, you idiot. Now you killed a cop. Now we're all in trouble."
Hmm.
And then, of course, he's in the stall. He can't see who's talking, but as he left, he sees an officer changing out of civilian clothes into uniform, and he said that officer was Roscoe White.
Hmm.
So three things, I mean, four or five things in that diary match up with the actions that we know that took place.
Yeah. In the beginning, when it says Lebanon, Saul, and Mandarin, who are those people?
Lebanon and Saul, we don't know who they are. Mandarin was the code name that was given to Roscoe, or he came up on his own. But the three cables that were found in the steel canister are all addressed. The heading said "Greetings, Mandarin," and so that apparently is Roscoe's handle in whatever organization he worked for.
Mm.
It was a code name. We had aliases, and now we have code names.
Yeah.
So, but to answer your question, Saul and Lebanon are unknown. We have no idea.
What does shot from fence definite hit mean to you?
That sounds like a headshot to me. Definite hit. I mean, if you hit somebody in the body, you don't know if that's going to kill them or not. But do you hit them in the head? That's pretty definite. That's
Yeah.
pretty final.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what he said. That he wrote. Definite hit. Yeah,
Yeah, and then when it says gun retrieved by man on the side, took to
yeah,
rail car area,
yeah.
what do you think of when you hear that?
To me, if let's just let's just speculate for just a minute.
Yeah,
If
for sure.
Roscoe was in uniform, carrying a rifle, and he's behind the picket fence, and he fires and hits his target, it's going to look pretty suspicious with a cop walking around with a rifle. So way we trained, we had the shooter, which was my role, the shooter, and a spotter, the guy who was giving you yardage and confirmation that the shot has been, the target's been hit or down or whatever it might be. I think that's your accomplice. That's your security guy. So you give the rifle to him, and he gets it out of the area, and then you can go on about being a regular, normal looking cop. Well, that dovetails with exactly what Ed Hoffman saw. He said he saw somebody shoot from the fence. Said a man was running down the fence, parallel to the fence, with a rifle across his chest, and then suddenly stopped and tossed it to another man who was wearing worker coveralls, and that worker caught it and took it apart and put it in a bag and walked quickly out of the parking lot. Now we've got the evidence is disappearing. None of these, the shooter doesn't have a rifle, and the guy who gave it to doesn't have a rifle. So if anybody encounters them, like law enforcement, I don't have any rifles. I didn't shoot anybody,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So th- Roscoe wrote that in the diary in 1963. We believe he did. Then he didn't know that Ed Hoffman was going to see that action because nobody knew where Ed Hoffman was at the time.
Yeah.
So that to me was a clincher as far as Roscoe's story being accurate
Yeah.
because two independent people see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Th- there are people who believe that Ricky is making up the diary or making up the story or substantial parts of it for clout, financial gain, attention, whatever it is. What makes you so sure that the diary is legit, it wasn't fabricated, that it actually existed, and that Roscoe is telling the truth or not Roscoe, that Ricky is telling the truth about his father, Roscoe White, to the best of his ability?
Well, first of all, we have 5 people that confirmed the diary's existence and actually read it and looked through it. So we know it existed. Um, Ricky and Trisha have no reason to lie about anything, especially what the diary confirms. Remember, I said that the two of them were interviewed separately. They told the same story. I don't know anybody that could recite that information that clearly and that accurately under pressure. And then, second of all, I've talked to in my while I was a law enforcement officer, I've interviewed I don't know hundreds of people, and in the JFK assassination, I've interviewed probably 50 or 60 people. I can tell you with 100% certainty that Ricky could not have made this story up. It's too complex. The artifacts that he produced, the bona fides that we've confirmed that these things did exist and that were complementary to that time, the 1960s. There's no doubt in my mind that Ricky is telling the truth. There's a famous quote, well, not famous, but there's a quote that we put in the book from Gary Cartwright, who wrote an article for Texas Monthly Magazine in the 1990s, saying Ricky could no more have made this up than he could explain the origin of the universe. And it's not saying that Ricky is a dumb guy. He just said this is too convoluted for somebody to come up with all these things. Hide the canister in the attic, and then my dad's dog tags in it, and negatives from grandpa and grandma, and the cables, and the photographs, and it just why would you spend that much time putting that
Yeah.
together, not knowing if anybody's going to believe you or that anybody would even look at it more than just a glancing? Well, that's nice that you have artifacts, but Zach, I can tell you, he's 100% accurate. I mean, he's 100% truthful. There's no signs of deception. I mean, the very first time I met him, I was kind of intimidated because here's a guy I've read about since the 90s, and I finally got
Yeah.
to meet him. And within 15 minutes, I could tell you he was emotional. He was genuine. He was not making it up as he goes. He was telling the story as he remembered it and living it, reliving it, and living it over and over again. Uh, there's no deceptive traits that I could ever determine from Ricky. Every time I talk to him, I look at him like that and look, as if I was an investigator.
Yeah.
Is he telling me the truth? He hasn't wavered from one moment after the first time I met him until just a couple days ago I talked to him.
Yeah. So you're not doubtful about any parts of Ricky's story as he's described his father, or the Roscoe White narrative in general. Like there may be some pieces missing from Roscoe White's life, but from what Ricky has come forward with so far, you're not doubtful about that.
No, not a bit, not one bit. I wouldn't have put my name on it. I wouldn't have agreed to have Gary work with Gary Shaw if I didn't think that this was a truthful story.
Yeah.
it's a story that needed to be told, and I think we've told it pretty accurately is what we can. I mean, with what material we've got left, I think it's a pretty accurate story.
Yeah. I also wanted to get into the cables because those are
Okay.
also fascinating to read. And so these cables were discovered, they weren't in the Marine Corps footlocker of Roscoe. They were in a sealed tight canister in
Yes.
Ricky's grandparents' house or their old
Yes.
house. He found those in an attic somewhere in the canister. And there are 3 different cables, only a few sentences each, and so I wanted to go through these to get your thoughts on them and your interpretation. So, cable number 1, and they're all from, Naval INT, which is Naval Intelligence. So cable number 1 from Naval Intelligence, this is February 1963. Quote, remarks Mandarin, which is the code name for Roscoe White. Code A, foreign affairs assignments have been canceled. The next assignment is to eliminate a national security threat to worldwide peace. Destination will be Houston, Austin, Dallas. Contacts are being arranged now. Orders are subject to change at any time. Reply back if not understood. And then from C. Bowers of OSHA, it's the same guy from all of them. What do you think is going on with this cable? Who's the national security threat to world peace?
Well, look at we start off at look at the third entry at the heading. Excuse me, the fourth entry at the heading. It says one. It's got the serial number 166-6106. That's Roscoe White's military serial number.
Mm,
It's like a social security number in the military,
gotcha.
and so that identifies who it's going to, which is Roscoe. And then, excuse me, Mandarin, who we've already discussed, is we believe is Roscoe's code name. Whoever put that on him. And then the foreign affairs assignments has been canceled. Apparently, there was some action that they were going to put him, Roscoe, into an operation overseas. That's the way I read that. But it's been canceled. We've got one. It's in a domestic assignment for you,
Mm,
and the next assignment is to eliminate a national security threat to worldwide peace. Well, you and I couldn't control worldwide peace or a national security threat. So to me, that means it's a top target, top
yeah,
politician or a top celebrity or whoever it might be that can control or influence worldwide peace. That's
yeah.
at the time it was probably Kennedy. And what I find interesting about this first cable is you look at the date; it's February '63. Destination will be Houston, Austin, or Dallas. Somebody already knows 10 months before the event that something's gonna happen in Houston, Austin, or Dallas. Those are the
Mm,
3 cities he visited the day before assassination. How did they
yeah.
know that in February? Did they have that planned that far in advance? That's a good question. I don't know. Contacts are being arranged now. That to me tells me that they're setting up, contacts outside the police department or maybe within the police department for Roscoe to contact, and they're gonna tell him who his contact is, who his coordinator or supervisor or, leader might be,
Yeah.
and then orders are subject to change, so be fluid, don't get all your eggs in this basket because it may change. And what I find is interesting is reply back if not understood. That's on all 3 of them, that he was gonna have to contact somebody if he doesn't quite understand what his assignment is. But
Mm,
right there in 5 sentences, it tells him, "We've got something that's coming down the pike, and you need to be ready for it and stand by for more orders."
mm,
And at the end of it, it's signed off on this C. Bowers. We're still trying to find out who C. Bowers is. We've got some ideas, but we have no credibility as far as absolutely 100% certain who this person is. But the initials, the OSHA initials. That's not OSHA. OSHA wasn't an agency in the United States government at the time.
yeah.
We believe, and Gary has found a couple sources that this is an office of very special handling. The Office of Special Handling Assignments or agency or something. that's like a, you know, a rogue agency inside another agency. Okay, we're
Yeah.
handling this. This is what we're doing. This is who you're taking orders from now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so cable number 2 from same naval intelligence. This is September 1963. Quote, remarks Mandarin code A, Dallas destination chosen, your place hidden within the department, contacts are within the letter, continue as planned, C. Bowers. What to you, what does hidden within the department mean and contacts within letter?
Well, it's to me, reading this from I guess, a tactical perspective.
Yeah.
Your place hidden within the department, the police department. There's no other. I mean, what other department could you be referring to? I don't know. Roscoe was on the department, hadn't been hired yet, but somebody in September '63 knew he was going to be on the department and wrote your place within the department. You know,
Yeah.
stay hidden within the department. He hadn't even got the job yet. They were still doing background checks on him, but I think they're talking about the police department. And then the last one is the contacts. Contacts are within this letter. Either there's a code on in that letter somewhere, a cryptology type code, or there's a microdot or something that there's another contact in that letter. So maybe there's more instructions on a different part of the letter we can't
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. And then the last one from naval intelligence. This is December 1963. Quote, stay within the department. Witnesses have eyes, ears, and mouths. You know what to do of the mix up. The men will be in to cover all misleading evidence soon. Stay as planned. Wait for further orders. C. Bowers. So to you, who's covering evidence? Who are these men and what are they covering up?
Well, I think they're making sure that somebody on their team does something about uh, the contradictory evidence about the Oswald. You know, Oswald's our guy. That's the guy we got to pin this thing on, and you know what to do about the mix-up. The mix-up, I think, is the maybe the Tippit shooting. I don't know. That wasn't planned. I don't think it was a planned operation. I think that would just happen because Roscoe maybe panicked. But uh, witnesses have eyes, ears, and mouths. I think that to me, I interpret that as okay. If anybody starts spouting off about, I saw different things other than Oswald, he would have to take care of that. However, he
Yeah.
took care of it, I don't know. But I think he was being told, watch out. People are talking, people are watching, and people are hearing. So be advised that, your job maybe is to help get rid of those folks. I don't
Yeah.
know. And one of the things I was going to point out, Jack, was notice that the first two cables say remarks Mandarin code A. This
Mhm.
one is code C. The
Oh,
job
yes,
is
that's right.
done. Yeah, the job is done in December. So code C and code A are obviously referred to two different things, I think,
Mm,
but they're still signed off on Bowers
yeah.
OSHA. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear to me, it's pretty clear what these messages are saying. You're our man in the department and you got to help us out. And that was your assignment.
Yeah. No, it's an incredibly straightforward, succinct language, all of the cables. Have you have you had a former Navy intelligence guy or some sort of special operations guy look at these cables just to
Yes.
see, does it sound like language that would be sent out?
Yes. Gary had John Stockwell, a former CIA operative and head of the Far East. Well, I'm not sure the Far East. There was on a African country that he was the station chief or assistant to the station chief. He said, and Gary showed him these cables. He said those are properly formatted. I've seen those cables before. I've had messages similar in that similar format sent to me. And then we also had Jerry Patrick Hemming. Gary showed him the cables. Jerry Patrick Hemming was a mercenary was involved in the Bay of Pigs training with Frank Sturgis, uh, basically a soldier of fortune who was a CIA contract agent. He
Mm.
also told Gary that, yes, these cables are familiar. I've seen these before. I've been handed cables like this before. So this is not out of the ordinary, this formatting. And again, writing things down and having it kept, they didn't expect. That's why it's, you see these in these spy movies. You destroy your message so you don't nobody so nobody will see it. Roscoe, I believe, kept this to CYA, cover his ass, basically. Look, I didn't do this on my own. I was told this was my assignment. I did my assignment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, admitted assassin is an incredibly compelling case for Roscoe White being the one who shot JFK as part of this highly organized multi-shooter ambush. So I encourage, people, even if you're peripherally interested in the JFK assassination, check out Admitted Assassin, look at what's laid out. You can make your own decisions, but it's a compelling case nonetheless. That just leaves who do you think organized this ambush? If Roscoe White was the shooter, who do you think might have been behind the organizing of the assassination?
That's $1 million question. I think back when I first got into this, I thought it was, CIA. I, I think the CIA had their fingerprints on it, but I think for the actual tactical part of it, these were military trained people.
Mm,
Um, this is the way they work. I mean, they're trained to kill people. They're trained to take orders and do what they're told. And they probably have done this before. And whoever this group is that organized this knew that these people could be trusted because they had done these things before, and so they just enlisted them into another operation. My big question would be, what did they say, or who did they, when they, let's say I recruited you to do this job, what could I say to convince you that Kennedy was a threat that had to be eliminated by violence? I I don't know how do you convince somebody who's a soldier who, stands up for democracy and fights the good fight and then turns around and goes, "Yeah, you're right. I think we ought to kill him." What
yeah,
what brainwashing technique did you use to get him to
yeah.
get these people to do that? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I recently spoke to Thomas Mayer, who's the author of Mafia Spies, and he
Yeah,
that book is about, and now it's a series on Paramount, but it's about how the CIA hired the mafia essentially to try to assassinate Castro, and it runs through this whole remarkable espionage plot where there were tactical units being run by the CIA and the mafia in southern Florida. There's
yeah,
the whole Cuban side to it with, were there double agents in Cuba? Was Castro getting wind of, this was approved by Bobby Kennedy and JFK? This was late 50s, early 60s. Have you seen any connection or any piece of evidence that would point you to a mafia or Castro connection to the murder of JFK?
no, I think the mafia. I think the only to me the mafia had a couple connections. One was the money. I think that's where some of the money came from. And then the Jack Ruby connection, obviously, if Jack was mobbed up, I sound like a slang. If Jack Ruby was associated even on the edge of the mafia, he was probably given a great line out of The Godfather. I'll make him an offer he can't refuse. I'll make all your problems go away if you do this for us. The bad, the he Oswald's a bad guy. He killed our president. So, if you can get in there and take care of him, we'll see that you're never, all your troubles will go away.
Yeah.
So, other than that, mafia doesn't operate like that. You know that, and I know that. This was a long range plan to use skilled people who were not associated with the mob or maybe they were contract agents for the CIA or Navy intelligence or OSS or whoever it might have been. But as far as mafia involved, 100%, I think it's a very small percentage of the mafia. I think it's a small percentage. I think the people organizing it were at the top of the food chain, like CIA and Office of Naval Intelligence and those kind of people. but the actual boots on the ground, those were military people.
Yeah. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this because you've, like we said in the beginning of the podcast, you've dedicated your life to the assassination of JFK, a world leader, a global figure from history. Having had that perspective and just, the hundreds of thousands of hours that you've just been sifting through assassination related video, photos, anything you could get your hands on. What were your thoughts when you saw the Trump assassination attempt? Was it like surreal to see the
Yeah,
thing that you were studying in real time? Like,
yeah,
holy shit, this like could have been another JFK.
yeah, exactly. Um, One of my friends is a Trump supporter and said, "Hey, did you see that Trump almost got a shot? Almost got shot." And I turned on the TV or whatever and watched it, and the earmarks are the same. Um, Assassin gets in within close range. Nobody knows he's there. Secret Service is on the job, but they're not doing their job. Um, and multiple shots are fired and three people were hurt. One guy was killed, collateral damage. I said, it's almost a mirror of the Kennedy thing. And it's going to be another 50 or 60 years before we end up knowing everything. And I got to be honest with you, I don't watch it because one, I'm not a Trump supporter. And two, I don't want to start another case for another 50-year
Yeah.
journey. So,
Yeah.
but
One
yeah, I think
one's
the
enough for one life.
similarities are obviously there. Yeah.
Yeah, JFK is enough for one lifetime for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So, do you ever feel you spending so much time on one topic? Do you ever feel where you have moments where you're just losing your goddamn mind from staring into the abyss, like all day, every
Yeah.
day, just the same thing?
Yeah.
Uh, what do you call it? Like, not mirror zoned, but like, sort of like tunnel vision.
Yeah.
JFK. Do you
Yeah.
ever feel like you're going crazy in those moments?
Yeah. Sometimes, what brings me back to reality is that, here's a murder mystery that all the pieces and most of the pieces are still there. We just got to figure out how they're put together. But it's a puzzle. It's like doing a puzzle backwards and not knowing what the picture is going to look like, and
Yeah.
you try to figure out what does this mean and how is this connected. I had in my old office, I had you've seen the movie, In the Line of Fire with Clint Eastwood, where he supposedly portrays or Secret Service agent Clint Hill, and the bad guy John Malkovich has got a whole wall of pictures and yarn and thumbtacks and stuff like that. I had something like that on a big giant. I had put three whiteboards together and built a collage, if you were, of just it got to the point where it's too much, and so
Mm,
I'm pretty selective on what I dig into. And like I said earlier, the photographs and the statements and the reports and the physical evidence. That's where I seem to concentrate on that because if you start going outside that, you go a little bat nuts.
yeah.
But yeah, there's some days when I just want to just not go there because you know we may never solve it. And if we can name the people who are involved, that's our goal. But how can we bring a dead person to justice?
Yeah.
But yeah, let's put it this way, Zach. It keeps me off the street. It
Yeah.
keeps me out of trouble.
There you go. That's all you can ask. Well, Brian Edwards, thank you so much for your time. Where can people check out your work? Where can they pick up Admitted Assassin? How can they keep up with everything that you're doing with the JFK assassination?
Well, first of all, Admit Assassin is available on Amazon, but it's also available. We encourage you to buy it through our publisher. You get a little bit of a discount. It's Penel Publishing. It's Peniel Unlimited. You can go on their website and buy it from that. But it's available on Amazon. Um, what was the other part? I'm sorry. What was the
Oh,
other
and,
part of the
and then just
question?
what's the best place for people to follow to keep up with your work? If you have an email
Oh,
list or Twitter, anything like that.
I don't have a Facebook page anymore, but we have Casey Quinlan and I wrote a book about the Ed Hoffman story, And we have a projectjfk.com website where we have posted a lot of information, a lot of initial original pictures that Gary Shaw provided for us. We've posted a lot of those pictures there that are the clearest of any picture you'll ever see in a magazine or online. So we have that website, and we also I'll tell you, I can give you my email. You've got my email address.
Yep.
If you want to post that, you can do that. And I also would encourage some folks to watch the YouTube that I did last year at Allen Public Library, almost 3 hour presentation on
Yeah.
the tactical part of it. That's a good starting point. But yeah, I'd be glad to answer any questions that any of your viewers have or listeners have. I'd be, that's how we keep the message going. Is
Yeah.
we respond and hopefully stir somebody else into looking down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that presentation was great, super informative, very interesting. I'm gonna link all that stuff for people who are watching and listening in the podcast description, and I encourage you to go check it out and support Brian's work. And thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me.